Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to wish you a very, very happy New Year as we convene our first Humanity Rising session in 2025. Today is January 6th, 2025. I'm in Washington, D.C., and I could not get to the office today because the snow has fallen, for one thing, in very large amounts, but more fundamentally, the police have completely cordoned off the federal enclave, inside of which my office is located. So I couldn't get in to the office, so I'm broadcasting here from my apartment, not too far from the Cannon office building of the House of Representatives. I just wanted to note January 6th and what that's meant in terms of U.S. modern political history. It was 4 years ago today that the rabble stormed the Capitol with the intent of overthrowing the government. Over 400 of them were prosecuted and jailed. And now the very president that incited that action has been elected president of the United States and will probably very early on in his administration pardon all the people who incited the mob of violence. But that's not what I really want to talk about, because even though this day and these events will dominate the headlines, the real headline, which has been capturing world attention for the last several months now, since November of 2024, is the incessant presence of what were initially called drones, but have subsequently outgrown the drone categorization and are now referred to as orbs or objects or phenomena, and that are acting brazenly, with impunity, appearing over Air Force bases, nuclear weapons facilities, not only in the United States, but around the world, covering the planet literally with the largest mass sightings of UFOs, UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomena, in the history since the Second World War. The federal government has used every conceivable explanation. It is bordered on the ridiculous, as time after time they say they don't know, they're not harmful, they're not us, but we don't know, and don't worry. And this is, in my view, an augur of very important things to come in 2025 from our cosmic neighbors, who right at the moment when humanity teeters on the precipice of self-destruction due to the imminence of nuclear war and runaway climate change, alien beings are pressing their awareness onto us in increasingly explicit, undeniable ways. And this, I believe, is the real New Year's for 2025. It's not January 6th. That's a blip in a history that will be long gone after the extraterrestrials with whom we are now in incessant contact, who are warning us about what we're doing and giving us every indication that they are here to help us through if we will only transform human consciousness into an open embrace of our own planetary ecology, an open embrace of each other, and an open embrace to our cosmic neighbors who are now showing up. What this means, since they're here, knocking on our doors, is that we as a human race need to learn how to intelligibly communicate with beings that are so far advanced than we are that it appears that their primary means of communication is through mental telepathy. That's why you don't see many of the ETs with very big mouths. We got big mouths because we talk all the time. They apparently don't need to talk all the time because they communicate through mental telepathy, both with the craft that they pilot, with each other, and with the human beings that they've encountered. In my view, each and every one of us taking personal responsibility to learn remote viewing and mental telepathy so that we can communicate individually, but also en masse with the extraterrestrials is the greatest challenge in our personal and collective lives. And that's why we wanted to start off our new year with our very first session on ET communication, because this is the event of 2025. So thank you, everyone, for joining us here on Humanity Rising. It's a wonderful, wonderful way to start the new year. And we all appreciate your ongoing viewership and participation in our growing Humanity Rising community. So thank you. It's my pleasure now to introduce someone that you've seen a number of times here on Humanity Rising, Birdie Jaworski, who has been involved in remote viewing and in communication with extraterrestrials for well on 30 plus or minus years. She was one of the original vice presidents of the Farsight Institute. That was one of the initial organizations engaged in remote viewing. She's now the head of TransDimensional Mapping. She's developed her own technique for learning remote viewing. She's been doing some remote viewing on this recent UAP sightings that we'll be getting into. She's conducting a course that is going to take place between the 15th and the 19th of this month in just 10 days' time. We'll be putting that link in the chat box because I'm going to take the course. I'm going to be taking time off to just immerse myself in remote viewing because I believe actually what I've been saying, that intelligible communication with extraterrestrials is the most important thing any of us could be doing right now on planet Earth, given our circumstances. So, Birdie, welcome to Humanity Rising. Why don't you turn on your video? And Happy New Year,
everybody.
My friend.
Happy New Year to everyone out there. I'm so excited to be here and to be talking about remote viewing and how we can use it to communicate with our cosmic family.
Well, listen, why don't we start, Birdie, by you just giving us, just a brief background and filling out your very deep professional and personal experience in remote viewing and mental telepathy, but also around using that for ET communication.
Absolutely. I first learned about remote viewing in 1995. So that was 30 years ago when it was declassified by the government. They acknowledged that they had spent 20 years and over 20 million taxpayer dollars to train soldiers, regular guys in the military and women, to become psychic spies. And this program was called the Stargate program. And when it was declassified, the government acknowledged that it worked to some degree, but they said it didn't work well enough to continue funding the program. Now, that was a lie. That was a complete lie. Of course, they have continued working in remote viewing. Recently, Skip Atwater, one of the architects of this whole program, talked about how at the time they actually had 5 different remote viewing programs going, and it has been continued to be researched in some very secretive places. But at that time, all of these military guys that had just reached retirement age were doing the news circuit. They were being interviewed on 60 Minutes, CBS Sunday Morning. And this was before the internet was like a huge thing. It was just in its infancy to the public at that point. So you couldn't like go online. There was no Google to start searching for any information on this. So I really had to search and try to figure out how could I learn these amazing skills. I thought I might be good at it. So I ended up discovering that I was living.
What gave you the sense that you'd be good at it? Were you naturally intuitive?
I always felt that I was. And maybe that's just from being a mom. I'm mom to 5 children, all grown now. And, women's intuition, I always felt like I had a little bit of a second sense going on. And I just had to learn this. I had also had some UFO experiences growing up where I saw craft and had encounters as a child, and I wanted to understand those better. So I was living in Atlanta, Georgia at the time, and there was a sociology professor at Emory University right there in Atlanta named Dr. Courtney Brown, who had just taken training with one of these military psychic spies, Major Ed Dames. And Dr. Brown was finishing up a book that would go on to be a New York Times bestseller called Cosmic Voyage, in which he described all of his remote viewing sessions, looking at all kinds of interesting things from the mundane to the very off world. And he was just about to open up a training school to teach other people how to remote view. And so I got involved with the Farsight Institute at the very beginning. I ended up trading my skills as a web designer, kind of the beginning websites kind of a thing, for taking the training because it was quite expensive. It was over $3,000. And I couldn't afford that being a young mom in my late 20s. So I ended up taking the training, and sure enough, I was pretty good at it, but everybody was pretty good at it. That was amazing to me. We had a whole class, maybe, a couple dozen or like a dozen and a half people from all walks of life. And every single person in the class learned how to remote view. It blew me away. And I ended up working for Farsight. I worked my way up the ranks, became the first vice president at Farsight. And after a couple of years, I left to start my own remote viewing company called TransDimensional Systems. And this was the first ever remote viewing consultancy out there. We had all kinds of clients from law enforcement agencies on the local, state, national level that hired us to look for things like missing persons, missing artwork. We also did work for companies, for hedge funds, all kinds of interesting clients, private clients as well.
What did you do with the hedge funds? Did you help them predict the market?
A little bit of that. And actually, this one hedge fund that we worked for, the main manager of that fund was terrified of his plane getting hijacked because this was just post 9/11. And so he wanted us to remote view every single plane trip he was going to take going out into the future to make sure that he wouldn't get hijacked or terrorist attack wouldn't happen. And so it was pretty interesting. People have all kinds of crazy things that they want you to remote view. And I train people all over the world, thousands of people in in the method of remote viewing that I was using at the time. Now at Farsight, the system of remote viewing that Dr. Brown was teaching, he called SRV for scientific remote viewing, and it's an offshoot of the military method, which is called CRV for controlled remote viewing. There are only a couple of minor differences between those two schools of thought. And when I left to start my own business, I made even more changes, and people have come to call my old method TDRV for transdimensional remote viewing. I felt that the language involved in remote viewing, because this was by design, it was very militaristic. That it was patriarchal, militaristic, and very controlled. The whole point of remote viewing and having the set of protocols is to keep your left brain, that part of you that wants control, that wants an answer, that wants to make a determination about something, busy by doing scribbles, doodles, all kinds of interesting things, so that your more intuitive side, your right hemisphere, can let loose with this extremely relevant, rich data about whatever's happening where you're remote viewing. And remote viewing, it's typically done blind, not always, but all students do blind sessions, meaning when you start a remote viewing session, you don't know where you're going to go. There is a tasker, that would be me in terms of the class coming up next week. And you get a target. That's a military word that I don't like to use, but everyone knows what that means, so I'll keep using it today. So you get a target, which is a photograph, say, of the Taj Mahal or Mount Rushmore or the Eiffel Tower, and a set of random numbers are associated with it, and you are only given those random numbers, and you're off and running. And at the end of your session, you will have described and sketched exactly what was in that photograph. So I had a lot of fun training and teaching. And one of the projects that we did, we looked at the next terror attack on the United States. And this was in late 1998, around there, early 1999. And I ended up drawing what ended up being the 9/11 attacks. And I became quite well known for my remote viewing skills at that time. I drew the Twin Towers, airplanes flying in, Statue of Liberty off in the distance. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. And at the time, I didn't think those could be airplanes flying into the buildings. I thought they were bombs, like cartoon bombs with the little wings you see on Bugs Bunny. And but of course, it ended up being airplanes. And so I was on a lot of news programs at the time, and a lot of different magazines and newspapers sent journalists to come take my class. Even the women's magazine Cosmopolitan sent a reporter out to take my class. It was crazy. And we had a lot of fun. We looked at all kinds of things. And one of the things I was highly interested was in developing communications techniques, because when you're a remote viewer, sometimes something tries to talk with you, especially if you're looking at an ET target, like the Roswell crash, for example, or some of the other famous cases out there with contactees. When you start describing and sketching and drawing them, you oftentimes get a message. This is very common. Even the military remote viewers talk about this. That's very common. Sometimes you even see other remote viewers if you're looking at something where other people have gone to remote view it, and you can even have a conversation with other humans using telepathy in remote viewing. So I started working on ET communication techniques at that time. But because, we really had a big prominent place in the field of remote viewing, my group did at that time. And there was a lot of pushback, not only from some of the old guard in remote viewing, but also from government and government adjacent circles. They clearly didn't want this getting out into the public at that time. I was making it extremely accessible and easy to learn, and having a lot of fun in the process. We were getting a lot of attention. And so a lot of harassment started. I started getting death threats leveled at my young children. And there were unmarked white vans with the windows blocked out that were following not only me, but other members of my team. I wasn't the only one getting this harassment. Others on the team were as well.
Hey,
And yeah, it was terrible. And
and about
so
what year was this, Birdie?
this was around 2000,
Around 2000.
2001. Yeah, 2001, 2002. So in 2002, I mean, the harassment went on for a couple of years, but it kept getting worse and worse and worse. And finally, I, I I was afraid for my children's lives, afraid for my own life. So I decided just to shut everything down. And I did. I closed the doors to TransDimensional Systems, and I didn't stop remote viewing. In fact, it gave me like this inner fire to really figure this stuff out. And so I spent 22 years since then working
Jeez.
on my own on this while doing all kinds of other crazy things in life. But I started remote viewing with this deep, fiery passion that I didn't even have before, even though I loved it. I started doing at least 2 sessions every single day. I started,
Jeez.
yeah, looking at all the different techniques and really deconstructing what was going on. I wanted to understand my own mind so that every single session that I could possibly do, I wanted it to be as perfect as possible and as beautiful and rich and have directly related data. And so I spent, 22 years just in private research doing all of this. And I came up with a new system that I call TransDimensional Mapping, where you can actually figure way more out in a session. A number of very experienced remote viewers have come to take training with me over the past few months, and they all agree that this is the next step in remote viewing, what we're doing here. So it's pretty exciting. I'm
How would
just
you describe it being the next step?
Yeah, so in a
What does
traditional,
that mean, actually?
yeah, so in a traditional remote viewing session, if you have learned CRV, controlled remote viewing, or SRV or TRV, there's a number of different schools of thought that have all come, closely come from the military method, which works great. And this is not bashing the military method. But what happens in a session like that is you get limited impressions. You are not allowed to try to draw conclusions. If you think you know what it is, you're supposed to completely disregard that. And they would call that an analytic overlay. And so you end up with, maybe 10, 20 pages of data, but it's all disconnected data points and maybe some cool sketches, but you're not able to pull together the whole story of what's actually there. I mean, if I am remote viewing the Roswell crash, I want to know everything. I don't want to get little bits and pieces of data. I want to know it all. So in mapping, you work with those conclusions and you try to figure out what your mind is telling you. You develop this deep relationship between your subconscious mind and your waking mind. And it takes some time to get there, mind you, but people are loving it. It's super fun. So you get to draw connections between things. If anyone has watched any of my live remote viewing videos, I have them on my No Rivets YouTube channel. I just posted one a few days ago where I remote viewed the nature of God. Which is pretty cool. And of course, the drones are up there and some UFO things and some everyday things. But you can see while I'm mapping, I use huge pieces of paper, lots of colors and textures, crayons, markers, pencils, and I start drawing connections between things. So you get your little pieces of data like you do in CRV, and then you pull them together and you see, okay, how is this related to this? And it gives you a whole new batch of data that you would have never gotten if you didn't start drawing those connections together. And so by the end, you know what's happening. You can see what's happening. And I was so excited to finally begin teaching this a few months ago. I came back out of the RV closet. I feel it's time. It's an important time, I think, in human history right now. And I think that my voice is needed and that this work is needed. So I went public again, and I've taught several classes, and the students, it's all on another level. I mean, I've trained thousands in the past, and what students are doing in just 2 or 3 days is blowing me away and blowing them away too, especially those that have taken training in some of the military derived methods. They are loving these new techniques because now they're getting the full picture of what's happening. It's super cool.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, let's just delve into your own perceptions and remote viewing of this recent phenomenon of all these so-called drone sightings on, New Jersey, around the United States, that have closed down all these bases, not only in the United States, but in Europe and Asia, Japan. Uh, and uh, just give us a narrative of what you, Birdie Jaworski, through remote viewing, what has been your conclusions as to what's going on?
Well, I did one session in 3 parts now. Uh, I've been doing this for 30 years, so my methods are a little more advanced than what I teach to new students. But I typically will do, if I'm doing something that I feel is important, I'll do the first part on one day and then take a break, and then either later that day or the next day do the next part. So I did one session on the New Jersey drones in 3 parts. And I did this completely blind. Somebody who I trust as a tasker had called me up and said, "Hey, I've got something for you to do right away. It's super important." And I honestly thought it was going to be a missing person case, because usually when I get that kind of call, it's typically for something like that. There's a time thing involved and you've got to find that missing person before they're killed or whatever the case may be. So I thought that's what I was going to be diving into, but it wasn't. I started by drawing these like lights, red and green lights in the sky, like orbs. And I got the sense that these things were morphing and shifting. They were mimicking other things in the sky. Also drew a military helicopter, military style drone, actual real drone, not one of these fake drones. and I knew immediately, because guys, if you're taking that class next week, the first time you get a ET target, oh boy, you know it right away. You can feel it right away. And I knew immediately that there was non-human intelligence involved here. This was some kind of a ET, or I felt in some way it had kind of a similar feel to artificial intelligence to me, but it wasn't like human artificial intelligence. And I don't even think it was artificial intelligence per se. To me, that just means that there was this like unique symmetry and beauty and absolutely captivating layers of intelligence, like incomprehensible to my little human brain. I had a hard time describing it. So the first part of the session, I mainly described what was going on in the sky. I ended up drawing the New Jersey coastline. I drew a bunch of high towers and stuff in probably like Hoboken area. And I drew people on the ground looking up at the sky, holding cell phones, filming. And so the first part of the session was kind of an overview of what was going on. And I started to have a communication with that non-human intelligence. And at the beginning, it was a little limited. It was telling me, watch us, look up, watch us. It's important. Watch us. You need us. And so the next part of the session, on the next morning, I did these on December 3rd, 4th, and 5th, around 2, 3 in the morning, which is like, I get up at 2 in the morning. That's my normal circadian rhythm. And so that's my favorite time to remote view, because the world is so pure and quiet. My dog is asleep. It's great. So on the next morning, I then went back into the session and thought, okay, I really want to explore what this non-human intelligence is and what is it trying to tell us. And that session lasted about an hour. And all of these are on my YouTube. You can watch everything. There's so much there. It's very rich in data. And I started making all these connections and discovering that there was some kind of I drew it as a red spiral on my map, a big red spiral. And I don't think that it physically looks like a spiral. That's usually in remote viewing. You get that kind of a spiral thing. It usually means it's some kind of energy that's happening. So I was getting that these craft, whatever they are, were going into these spirals, and the spirals were over the ocean, right off the coast. And there were multiples of these spirals around. And so the UFOs, I'm just going to call them UFOs because that's what they are. These are not Chinese drones. These are not from an Iranian mothership. These are this is not human technology.
Thank you for stating the obvious.
These are UFOs. So these UFOs were going into these spirals and going down into the water, and they were having this deep communication with each other. When they would go down into the water, they were meeting up, and I kept getting it as recycling, this idea of recycling. They were sharing information, and then they were given new information. So they would share what they got, then they would get, it would be like a whole upgrade for everybody, So because this was a collective, it came very strongly that this was a collective, even though there are individual entities involved. Each craft, each UFO actually was an entity in and of itself. It was a sentient being that was able to mimic the things in the sky around it, or to look like an orb, or to reduce itself to the tiniest pinpoint, like on the quantum level, something so tiny you couldn't see it with a microscope. And so they were gathering information on whatever humans were doing. They were very interested in us. And they also had this intense desire to get us to change what we're doing, to change our ways, because we are at this brink right now of potential nuclear disaster. It's been, with the war in Ukraine and Russia and its posturing, and we've moved big old missiles to the UK. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world of nuclear weaponry right now, and they obviously very upset about that, and also very concerned, not just about that, but about who we are as a species and who we are becoming. That I got the sense that they saw us at this crossroads right now, and that they want us to make the right decisions, make good decisions right now. So that was what I got in the second part of the session. In the third part, I focused in on the military response, because when I first started the session, I got that helicopter and a drone, regular drone, airplanes and stuff. So I focused in on that helicopter pilot, and he was a young guy, military young guy. He was on some kind of stimulants, which I think they give to those pilots, like, to keep them awake. And he was scared. He was terrified because he knew he was looking at something that was non-human, and he received a message from these UFOs. He got a message too, the same message that I was getting. He got that message, and he was getting orders, and he was getting orders from somebody in a 5-sided building, probably the Pentagon, or somebody who, works in the Pentagon, but they were underground. Of course, the Pentagon has many levels underground. This guy was kind of a big shot guy, but not one of the big name generals, but somebody on a level lower to that, but in charge of some kind of military operations. And this guy was also working with another military guy who had a specialty in linguistics. And they were working together on this because they also got a message that they were trying to decode and understand. And the main military guy instructed the helicopter pilot to engage with the UFOs and to try to get them, to try to take them down, not to shoot them up, but like to use this anti-drone type of technology that they've developed, or maybe some kind of, EMF pulse or something like that. So whatever the helicopter pilot tried, nothing happened, it was completely ineffectual. So that's what I got when I looked at the drones.
And you've also asked through remote viewing what they do during the day. That's fascinating.
Yes, this is a new session that I am going to be putting up on my YouTube channel probably tomorrow. I have to put it together, but I was also given another blind task, and I didn't think I'd be looking at the drones for a little while, but everyone who wants to know what's happening, so here I am. So it's And it's a great task because I was tasked with finding out what are they doing during the day. Everyone's seeing them at nighttime. Nobody's having daytime sightings of these big drone swarms. It's purely a nighttime event. So I remote viewed what's going on in the during the day and where they're going. And so I'm super excited to be sharing this with everyone tomorrow. But what I got, and I'll give you guys a little preview, is that, and actually I got a lot more information on a lot more communication information. I really dug into the communication this time around. And, but I got that they were definitely going into the water. There's a big underwater base of some sort, almost like a huge mothership kind of a thing, or maybe it's stationary. I didn't get the sense that that was moving around so much. And they're all going in and out of that whole base. And I also got the sense that, you know, military knows where that thing is too, which was pretty interesting. But I also dived into.
I'm just going to pause there. So you're asserting there's a large underwater base, and that the U.S. military and possibly other militaries know where it is.
Yes. Yes.
And do you know, is it in the Atlantic? Is it in the Pacific? You have
I think there's a number of bases around the planet, but this one's in the Atlantic,
Gotcha.
off the coast, you know, it's kind of a ways out, but it's off the coast there on the East Coast.
That would explain the sightings of large number of drones coming in from over the ocean.
Right. Yeah. Because we have those reports now. People are saying 50 at a time coming in over the ocean.
Exactly.
Right. And so they're going into the water, and that's where they're sharing their information, getting their upgrades, so to speak, and then zooming back out for the night or for the next round.
Now, let me ask you a question that I think would be on a lot of people's minds who've been tracking it. And as everybody may know, on Humanity Rising, we convened a special drone summit. I think it was on the 19th of December, because we were trying to just keep up with it. And Birdie was on, and Chris Bledsoe and others. And as you know, Birdie, one of the assertions that's coming from Stephen Greer, Danny Sheehan, and others that were on the program, is that this is essentially a PSYOP. It's either U.S. or other militaries doing something, in Stephen Greer's notion, as a precursor to a group of people in the deep state coming out anytime now, but that this is basically all human. It's not NHI. It's not non-human intelligence. In your remote viewing, I know you've seen it as a UFO phenomenon, but is there any aspect of what we're seeing out there that is a military CIA PSYOP of some kind? Is that part of it, or is that just a fantasy?
I think that that's a fantasy. There are definitely a number of military or military adjacent type vehicles up in the sky, helicopters, their own drones, but they're mostly trying to figure out what's going on.
Yes.
You know, assessing the situation. This is not a PSYOP. I mean, there's all kinds of PSYOPs going around with the changing narratives that the government is providing. Now we have this situation with the Tesla bomber and his manifesto that claims that these are Chinese reverse engineered drones. No, it's not. It's not. These are non-human. It has a particular feel. You can't mistake it for anything else. These are UFOs, 100%. I know it. Regardless of what the government's trying to tell you. I love some of the narratives they provided, like when the foreign relations guy or whoever it was came out and said, "Oh yeah, these are just hobby drones like you can get at a convenience store."
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's just go to 7-Eleven and pick one up. I want a school
Yeah.
bus size drone, please.
Yeah. 39.95.
Exactly. No, no. And it hasn't stopped and it hasn't slowed. I've been following all the reports and people are still seeing them over New Jersey. The areas that they have been seen have
Yeah.
spread. They've gone north. They've gone a bit to the west. People are seeing them in other areas. And this is not a new phenomenon. That these same kinds of craft have been seen over military bases in Colorado. They've been seen over Utah. They've been seen over California, coastal California. This is not a new phenomenon. This has been going on for some time. And this is like the biggest flap I think we've ever experienced, biggest
Yeah.
UFO flap we've ever experienced. And I think it's
Yeah.
super exciting. Whatever this intelligence is, whoever these people are, they clearly are not here to destroy us. They are
No.
clearly not here to harm us in any way. They have this sense of benevolence going on where they really want to they want us to change what we're doing. It sounds like we kind of have to make those decisions ourselves. I don't get the sense that they're taking away our agency. They're allowing us to make these choices, but I think they're giving us a super strong warning here.
Well, let's turn to the seminal question of the day here, and that is ET communication, because I think this is what the course is about, to apply the technology of transdimensional mapping, remote viewing, toward ET communication. Knowing that remote viewing can be used for missing persons and all kinds of other dimensions. But let's just hone in on the course and what you've learned about using remote viewing, specifically with the intent of ET communication. Just talk to us a little bit generally about that, and then lead us into how your course will enable that enhancement of a faculty we all have. We just haven't
Everybody.
spent the time to apply ourselves to cultivating.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. Every single person on this planet is capable of remote viewing. Every single person. I have trained thousands, and I haven't met a psychic brick, not even once. Now, some are a little better than others right out the gate, but that's just like learning a musical instrument, for example. Everybody can pick up the clarinet and learn to play a few songs. But if you study and practice your scales, good practice, not just repetitive practice, but like really focused practice, then you can become great. I believe literally everyone out there is capable of becoming truly great at remote viewing. And so what you're going to be learning in the class is all the techniques that I teach in all of my regular classes. It's the same techniques, but we're going to be focusing on using these techniques to facilitate communication. One of the cool things about these mapping techniques is that the communication itself rises naturally during the process. For example, I taught a class in December, 5-day class, just like our upcoming class is going to be. And on the second day, and most of these people were new to remote viewing. They had never done anything before. And I had been giving them, for the first day, we looked at, different kinds of photos of things. And so the second day, I told them for the first 2 days, we're going to be looking at photos, because then you can compare what you get to the feedback and see how your mind is processing the data. So they figured it was going to be just something normal, but I gave them a photo on the second day of one of the New Jersey drones. It was a photo, right? And they could not believe it. They all knew that this was ET. They all knew it was ET. And several of them started naturally having a conversation with the drone in question on day 2 of class. Day 2, I kid you not. And I'm going to be showing some of that student data in my YouTube video I post tomorrow, because it's amazing. They were getting the sense that they were coming in and out of a portal. which was what I was describing. And they do the same spirals. They were getting the exact same things that I got. And the communication, when it is extraterrestrial, non-human in some way, a telepathic species, or a species that is so highly evolved in consciousness that it just permeates their entire existence, then that communication just arises naturally. And there are different techniques that we are going to learn as a part of all this whole process, where you can initiate a conversation, not only with an ET, but with any living conscious being out there. It's really quite remarkable. You'd be surprised how many things can tell you their story and are really happy to talk back, especially some of our cosmic family. They are super interested. They love when we reach out in this way, because we are on this evolutionary journey. And I mean, you look at young kids today and how they're able to really do a lot of this stuff just intuitively and naturally. Us old farts, we have to work a little harder at it, but they are so grateful that humans are making an effort to be a part of this big family of consciousness. It's super exciting. And I promise I have chosen the most incredible things to remote view next week. Most incredible. These are all things that I have already looked at, so I know what to expect and what kinds of messages you're going to get. And I think it's going to be super exciting. It's going to change your whole life. Everyone says that at the end of a class, that their life has been completely altered, completely changed, because now they know, and they're more than just a mind and a body. We are so much more than that. So
let's go a little bit more granular. So we're going to be meeting between the 15th and the 19th of January. We're starting at 9 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, going till 5 o'clock Pacific Standard. So that's 5 8-hour days, everybody, from a Wednesday through a Sunday. What do we do for 8 hours a day?
Well, you're going to be doing a heck of a lot of remote viewing. But first, just so everybody realizes, we will take regular breaks, so you can get up and go to the bathroom, get some water, get a snack, and we will take a meal break midway through the day. So, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab something from my kitchen and I'm going to eat right here at my desk. So we can use that meal time for a conversation. I'm happy to talk while I'm eating. I don't need a break. So you guys can pester me with questions. You can ask me about things I have remote viewed, or if you have questions about what we've covered in class. We're going to start the first day by just learning some of the basic techniques that everyone uses in remote viewing, regardless of what school of thought that you have come from, because some of those basic techniques are super useful, and they're going to open up that aperture and get you started. So the first day, we are going to learn a very, very modified version of the military system, but it's kind of like my old system I used to teach with a few twists. And we're going to be looking at photographs so that you can just start getting into the practice. And day 2, we are jumping immediately into mapping. And that's where you're going to have your large size piece of paper. Now, in the course description, there's a little list of things that you need to get. One of them is large size paper. It doesn't really matter what size, just something where you really feel you can get out there and draw and map and write things down. So nice big pieces of paper, like from an art pad is great. Or at some of the restaurant supplies here in town, they've got these big rolls of paper that that you cut off for tablecloths. That's great too. And cut off a piece and use that.
Yeah.
So lots of opportunity there. And then you want to get several different kinds of super colorful writing instruments, such as crayons, markers, colored pencils, and you also want to have several regular roller ball pens, because that's like the traditional tool used that the military used in remote viewing. We will start using the roller ball pens, but by day 2, we're going to be all over the place. You can use oil pastels too. I mean, anything, any kind of art supply that provides a color and a texture is useful. And you will find that you're going to intuitively pull out the color that makes the most sense. For example, in a class I taught a few months ago, I gave out a picture. It was a photo, and this was like on the second day of class. So the students were just learning how to do the mapping. And it was a photograph of the Wizard of Oz being filmed. So you have Dorothy there, a couple of the Munchkins, and the filmmaker. And in one of the students, she drew Dorothy, I mean, perfectly. Even and she pulled out the colors that matched the dress that Dorothy wore in the
Wow.
film. And then she grabbed a yellow crayon and she drew this big long road, and she like said out loud, I don't know why, but this road has to be yellow. Of course it was the yellow brick road, right? So colors tell you a lot about what's happening and can give you clues that you can then break down and make connections with. So that's what we're going to do on day 2 is start the mapping. We'll still be looking at photos. On day 3, we're going to start getting a little bit more into the ET stuff. And you might get some ET stuff on day 1 or 2. You never know with me. So and we're going to start talking about communication. And one of the ways that that we can learn about our ET family is by doing body scans. And this is actually really useful. It's kind of its own little protocol. You can kind of separate this out and use this yourself for diagnosing and healing physical, mental, and spiritual illnesses. It's super effective. We're going to be learning that on day 3. Because what you're going to want to do is if you find an ET in a session, you can do a body scan and discover exactly what they look like, what's inside their body, what kind of skin do they have? Are they wearing clothes? You can even find out, and this is a great way to start communication, because when you're scanning an ET's body, believe me, they know it. And then they're usually pretty happy to start talking while you're doing this. It's really fascinating. So that's what we'll be doing on day 3. And then on day 4 is we're going to really focus on communication, because by then you'll have all the tools you'll need to really start getting into the communication. And on day 4, we're also going to be talking about how to move around the target. So, sometimes you might start describing something and you're fixated on one small piece of it when there's so much more to describe. So we're going to talk about how to move and orient yourself around, how to go forward and backward in time, how to go inside and outside of things. It's super, super effective and fun. And then the last day, we're putting it all together, and we are going to be human ambassadors out there, guaranteed.
Yeah, citizen diplomats to the extraterrestrials. That's what we need to develop. And that's why I'm so excited about this course, and really applaud what you're doing. Now, just sort of the last domain I'd like to explore before we adjourn to the after chat. And Birdie's going to join the after chat, everyone, so you'll have a chance to ask her more questions. I'd like to focus on your general worldview about where all this fits into our historical moment. And I want to raise 2 points and then have you comment. One is that both in my introduction and in your remarks, we're drawing a similarity between humanity under duress and the extraterrestrial phenomenon, and making the assertion that they're here for a reason, both to warn and to help. But the second point I want to make is sort of a contradiction to that, and this is why I think this is such an important point to clarify for everyone. What we're hearing from the national security state is be afraid. What we're hearing from various people, that have been on all the podcasts is that, a threat is defined as capacity and intent. And if you don't know intent, you need to assume it's a threat. This is what I think is being carefully cultivated in the public domain, both in terms of a lot of the movies, the new Alien movie. The aliens are threats and humanity's got to protect itself. And there have been people, other channelers who believe that the range of ET beings that are with us, some may be benign, but others are malevolent. And that humanity has to be very, very careful because ultimately, this is a national security issue. So I'd love to have you comment on that because that seems to me, Birdie, to be the emerging dialectical conversation as as the cat comes out of the bag and the legacy group that's tried to keep it secret for the last 80 years loses control of the process for all kinds of reasons that we've discussed many times on Humanity Rising. The battle that is emerging is how do we interpret this phenomenon? Whether as a benign presence on Earth or ultimately as a malign presence on Earth, and that we need to approach it with a weaponized national security framework. So love to have your comment on how you, as both a remote viewer and experiencer, how do you hold these opposites that are appearing in the public discourse? And what would be your overarching comment?
Well, since 2017, when the kind of modern disclosure era began with Lou Elizondo stepping out, the New York Times article on the Navy pilots and the Tic Tac UFO, we have seen this conversation framed time and time again in terms of national security threat. This is what all of our members of Congress are saying when they talk about the UAP phenomenon. They are framing it in terms of national security threat. We have Lou coming out and talking about it in terms of national security threat, and many others as well. And I don't think that that is healthy or even true, because if you look in terms of all of our human history, going back to antiquity and the most early described reports about phenomenon like this, overwhelmingly, people are not harmed by this phenomenon. Yeah, sure, there's the occasional case where somebody encounters something and maybe gets radiation burns, or, there are the occasional things, but those are so minute compared to the body of evidence. All these different beings are, and I do believe that there are multiple species that have been visiting us and that are engaged with us. They have not at all blown up anything, taken over anything.
Exactly.
They seem to be coexisting with us on this planet. I believe for some of them, this is their planet too, in a meaningful way. Whether regardless of where they may have originally came from, they're here now, and they care for this planet just as we should. And so I don't think that the evidence is there to show that this is a national security threat. I think that that is simply a story that I believe some of the people interested in disclosure thought that kind of a narrative would encourage members of Congress to be okay with looking at this topic. I mean, I get it from that standpoint, because if you lead with, they're here to help us, most people are going to push back on that if they have a serious political career. But you frame it in terms of national security threat, and then you get more people at the table. I understand that, but I also think that that's extraordinarily unhealthy for everyone who's looking into this phenomenon, who is new to this. A lot of people are new to this phenomenon, and that is how they are being taught. And for those of us who have been into this for decades, I mean, we've read all the books, and we've met the contactees, we've done all kinds of interesting things, so we have a more nuanced perspective on this, and I think a deeper understanding of what's happening here. But for people new to the field, I think that this national security threat is going to cloud their judgment as to what this might be. And it's kind of silly to think about it in terms of a national security threat. What in the world can we do about it anyway, even if it were? What can we actually do? I mean, whatever kind of weapons they have in the most secret halls of the Department of Defense, guaranteed it would probably do nothing. So I think that that's also a silly narrative for that reason alone.
Well, you can even see, I mean, your last point, I think, is seminal. You can see it in this last spate of sightings where, they've tried to track them with drones, by helicopter. They've tried to shoot them. They've tried to do all these different things with them, but nothing works. They operate with impunity to even the most sophisticated human instrumentalities of challenge and aggressiveness, as if we're mere children playing with, pickup sticks in the face of their advanced technology. And so I think in our view at Ubiquity University and Humanity Rising, and I know yours, our obligation as a human race, as a human family, as a human community, is to begin to learn what I've called the mother tongue, to learn how to consciously, telepathically communicate with animals, trees, birds, fishes, other sentient life. If we could all learn how to communicate with other sentient life, including the ETs, we would naturally open the portals of consciousness that would change our current behaviors and attitudes, which are so aggressively oriented toward each other and the planetary ecology.
Exactly. There's so much you can do with this. There's so much more that you can be. I have had full-on conversations with my dog using remote viewing and learned interesting things about that pooch. And it's amazing that you can learn about, you can have conversations with people who have passed on into another plane of existence. You can, it's a wonderful tool for self-discovery as well as discovering about our ET neighbors. It's amazing. You can find out what your purpose on this planet is in this lifetime. I gave that out to the last session for my last group of students. I gave them the most important lesson that they are supposed to learn in this lifetime. And every single one of them knew that they were remote viewing themselves. There were many tears shed during that session. It was absolutely transformative. It was stunning. So super cool. So
fantastic. Well, yeah. Birdie, this has been a pure pleasure. And I'll put the link in the chat one more time, everyone. But if you've ever considered a course, this may be one of the most important courses you'll ever have the opportunity to take from a woman like Birdie Jaworski, who's a master of her craft and has been pioneering this domain for many decades and has now developed a TransDimensional mapping that is taking remote viewing and mental telepathy to a whole new level. Birdie, we're thrilled to be able to do this. And there was a couple questions of what I'm going to do during the course. The Humanity Rising starts at 8 a.m. Pacific, not 9 a.m. So I'll do the sessions, but they'll be a little shorter Wednesday, Thursday, 15, 16, 17, because I don't want to be late because the teacher doesn't like us being late.
It's going to be amazing, everybody. I swear you're going to have the time of your life. I have chosen already all the things you're going to experience, and it's going to turn your life upside down in the best way possible.
And just as a footnote, it's all part of the New Paradigm Institute, Ubiquity University ET Studies program. It's part of the certificate now being offered by Ubiquity University on extraterrestrial awareness and communication. Birdie's course, because it's 5 days, 8 hours a day, counts for 2 courses. But then starting in February on till December of this year, we'll be having a sequence of courses all around how to understand remote viewing and mental telepathy as a scientific phenomenon of consciousness, basically. And also, what are those practical ways, as Birdie's going to do starting on the 15th, that we can actually communicate intelligibly with these wonderful beings that are here to help us get through the current impasse. So Birdie and everyone, thank you all so much. That'll
Okay.
do it for us for today. Birdie will join us in the after chat. And then tomorrow, on the 7th of January, we're going to have Kala Perkins, a cosmologist, who's going to tell us what's happening in the planetary system and in the sun of an unusual nature at this time. I think all of us have a sense that we're going into major changes on planet Earth. And it's not only happening here, but it's happening at the level of the entire solar system. So Kala Perkins will be with us tomorrow here on Humanity Rising. Thank you, everyone. That'll do it for us for today. You can join the after chat. You'll see the link in the chat box. You receive the link in your Zoom reminders for today. And we'll see you all again tomorrow on the 7th of January. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Birdie.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks,
Wonderful stuff.
everybody. See everybody in
Wonderful.